Hello and welcome once again to my channel. It's Carlton Black Ops King, back to you again to do one of my small little ditties on Brexit and things surrounding the Brexit issue. As per normal, if you want to subscribe, press the button below. The last one I did was in German. If somebody wants one in, say, Spanish or in Dutch, I can probably do that for you as well. But without any further ado, let's wait on this little vlogs issue, which is actually going to be about what the EU actually did for the United Kingdom in terms of what we had within the EU, or we have. Okay, one of the things I often hear is we get nothing from the EU. What do we do? What's our influence? Where are we going with it? Okay, let's hit the influence bit. For many a year, when I was carrying out work with national security operations, protection operations, one of the people who I'd often bump into was Caroline Ashton, Baroness Ashton as she's known. She basically, for want of a better word, was the EU's foreign secretary. So right there, the issues that the EU was going to deal with as a collective body out of Brussels was run by a British woman. That was the High Representative, Caroline Ashton. Also, now and then when I carried out some actions with Europol, the head of Europol was a Brit. So a Brit was in charge of Europol, and that guy ran it as a European-wide police service. We also had a judge on the European Court. So by that what I mean is the EU's aspect thereof, not the bigger body of the European Court outside of the EU within Europe as general. So we also had the leading commissioner on foreign affairs within the EU. We also had many negotiators in terms of negotiating new contracts with other countries, be they supplicant countries, countries which are coming into the EU, or trade deals such as with Japan and Canada. We had British negotiators also involved in that. We were very, very, very good at putting forward ideas and issues out with the general EU perspective, because oftentimes there's a view of the EU being much more collectively together. Britain sometimes would stand alone and push its ideas that were, if for want of a better word, more anglicised. So in a sense, more American, British anglicised ideas. And those are often pushed by UK either members of the EU or, more importantly, from our government. So our ideas that we were able to put in the Council of Ministers, which often went a long way, and we were able to garner support, particularly from the former Eastern Bloc countries and the Scandinavian countries. So we acted as a counterweight to the Germans, it would be perceived as, and to the French. That said, we got on very well with the Germans as well. So Britain always had a position. So issues like, frankly, the single market, the customs union, those are issues, actually ideas often brought off from British ideas that were brought about that made it function, the EU function, much more progressively on free trade. Those are British ideas. We're also very, very forward-thinking in terms of our security and intelligence sharing and understanding, albeit that we didn't necessarily want to sit inside some of the justice aspects like Schengen. We were a strong player in those aspects of the EU. Also very strong players in Euratom, very strong players in the scientific community, very strong players in any connections with NATO. And in fact, the whole idea of what the EU's foreign policy should be, we were strong players within that aspect of the EU. And finally, what I'd also say is that for many countries who weren't necessarily enamoured of the Germans, let's say, or the French, they saw and see Britain as a counterweight and would sit behind the UK. So the UK had a lot of influence, which is why, of course, the United States, up until this president that came in, didn't want us ever to leave the EU because we could push forward their ideas within the EU. Now, this president, yes, wants us to leave the EU. The reason being is that this president isn't that interested in collective security. He's not that interested in collective, if you will, organisational perspective vis-a-vis the world trading processes. What he's interested in is having the EU split off into a single country, because what he can then do is play the single countries off against the United States. You've already seen that action as he's playing it with the trade war with China, and you see him doing to some extent with Russia the same. You see his designs on Iran. What he didn't want was a very powerful body, the EU, politically powerful body, coming back at him and being able to politically and economically challenge the United States. No, what he wants, a singular European states who can then be cut off very easily. And even the super one, which is Germany, let's argue, economically, the United States can deal with that as well. So the whole point is, from this president, his wish would be, from a right-wing perspective, from the neocon type perspective of the US, would be to break up the European Union and to have them as their singular states, and that leaves the US as the only state capable of doing anything by itself. So, folks, that was it. Come back to me with any ideas, any questions, any points that you want to raise, and we'll go again from there. All the best. See you again.